To Vision Plus.
Tonight we're going to talk about the joy of caregiving. Caregiving is something that most everyone in the universe has to deal with occasionally. Either a parent, a grandparent, a spouse, a child, special needs child, someone. And tonight we're going to listen to several people tell their experiences with caregiving, because it is something that only about a few years ago, it was like 17% of the population had to be caregivers. Now, this year, it's 70 million caregivers. And so it's so many more people are having to move to in with their children, in with their parents, in with their siblings, and we're going to hear from several of those tonight.
Our Father in heaven, we ask you to be with us tonight, each one here and all of those that's out in TV land. We ask you to be with us because so many of us are caregivers, or will be sometime in our lives. And we thank you for all the blessings that you've given us and that you keep bestowing on us. We ask you to be with those who need you, those who love you, and those who you love. And they don't know yet that they love you, but they will. And we ask you to just be with each one of us tonight as we go through this program, and be with Bonnie and all the participants, and just give them a special grace and favor. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Now, Tony said something about a lot of caregivers. By the way, we're at the Village of Providence Clubhouse, and we had a water problem in the seminar room, so we had to come over to the room that's underneath the gymnasium. So if you hear a lot of noise, people dropping their barbells or whatever they're doing, you'll know what it is. They're not coming after you, I promise. We are so excited to have several of the people here, and some that haven't arrived yet, because I did say something about 6 o'clock, so it's a little bit before that at the time we're taping this. So next we're going to have Sherry Muller, that came over here from Gunnersville. Sherry is a person I've known for 20 years. When our daughter Emily Dawn got killed, we'd be up at the lake house, and she'd get up, knock on the door, "Come on, Bonnie, you know you want to see the sunrise." And so she would listen to me cry and talk for about a year or two every morning. So I love that woman a lot. And her husband, Steve, was one that would bass fish with Tony and David, our grandson. And sometimes he would come over and repair our, come on in, if you would, Deborah. Come on, hon. Deborah Berry just came in. Help yourself to your name tag and literature. And because we're here and this is very informal, as you can tell. But she had the incredible experience of her husband, Steve, that we loved so much for the last couple decades. He had a stroke. And let's hear from Sherry now what happened to her. And Deborah Berry just walked in. She's the one that's the encourager, her favorite word. So now let's listen to Sherry Muller.
Hi, I'm Sherry Muller, and I'm so glad to be here tonight to tell you a little bit about the experience that I've had through the last 6 years with my husband. In 2006, he had a stroke, and he was 59 years old. And fortunately, I was home with him, and I noticed when he came to bed, I noticed he had a different look about him, and I noticed a little drawing in his face, and I realized that he was possibly having a stroke. So I called an ambulance and got him to the hospital quickly, and all the things that go on with having a stroke seemed to happen to him, and we ended up taking him to a hospital in Birmingham, and there he spent over a month recuperating, and of course he survived that. And the time that I went through with him was, of course, that was like someone pulled a rug out from under us in our lives. We were self-employed and we worked together, and we were fortunate enough to be able to, I was able to stay at home with him and care for him. But through that time of caring, it was some of the things that I gleaned from that was, of course, the closeness he saw in me that he never thought about before. And I remember him saying to me, "You must really love me." And because for you to do these things, I mean, I had to do everything for him. I had to, brush his teeth for him. I had to put him in his wheelchair, and I had to keep him in the bed, keep him from falling out the bed. And we had to, fortunately, we had a home we could go to that was flat, because that's very important when you have someone that's going to be in a wheelchair or a walker. And so we went through all those normal things that at the time you don't find them to be normal. But as far as someone going through a situation to where they're depending on you to provide everything for them. And I know that there were times I thought, Lord, how am I going to do all this? I just had to reach down in and pull out a deep amount of strength just to get through a day with him. And then as he progressed, it seemed like he got stronger every day. When we went home, we had home health people come out and help me a little bit with his exercises. But fortunately, when he came home, we were able to get him in a wheelchair, he was able to sit up. And then it progressed to where he could stand and he could use a walker. And then he got into the point where he could walk by himself. But he always had a weakness on the left side, and he couldn't seem to grasp things. But he still had that gusto for life. I mean, he wanted to do better. So he really fought to try to come back to his life. And I guess the new word now that people use is finding a new normal. And that in itself was very challenging. I used to think I used to be Mrs. Stephen Muller, and then I became somebody else. I was his caregiver, and I had to find out who I was in that realm, because once you're giving and giving and giving, you become very debilitated in your strength by the end of the day or whatever. But the strength that I did continue on, and of course my faith helped me greatly. And but he wanted to do things. He was always wanting to do something. He wanted to ride a bike. He wanted to drive his car, and he didn't have the mobility. But he had the tenacity in this to stick to it, and he did ride a bicycle. But he found a bicycle that had 3 wheels, and it's a recumbent, and he could steer here, which was a great, great asset for that, because he couldn't grip handlebars and lean over. And but in his life now, he still wanted to do things, and he had a deep desire to reach out to people. At our church, they were taking a trip to Montana. I remember thinking, he said he wanted to go on this mission trip to Montana, and it was going to be at a wilderness Bible camp, and he's in a wheelchair. And he was going to have to be in a dorm with boys and men, and I was going to be in a dorm with women. And I thought, how are we going to do this? How? But I just took it as it came. And I think as being a caregiver, I couldn't focus on anything else at that time. I had to focus on him and getting him through the airport. And I remember that first trip. He's in a wheelchair, and of course they do accommodate you somewhat, but you still have to get from point A to point B. And that was just like a blur to me. It was very, very taxing on me and him as well, because he didn't want to be in that situation. He didn't, and he could see it was straining me. But I guess what things that rewards we got from that was the time that we had together, but the time that it seemed like people would gravitate towards us in a sense because of our situation. They would see the two of us and they might lend a hand. They would start to talk to us. And he was very outgoing, and he made an impact on someone else's life by the things that he said to them. And I guess it is that I never gave up. He never gave up, and things did get better. He got to a point where he could drive, but he had to realize his limitations as well. And I would ride with him, and oftentimes I would wonder, oh Lord, I can't believe they let him have his driver's license. But it did get better, and he got better. And but as time goes on, I think as caregivers, we have to remember, we have to take a little pullback and take time for ourselves. When he got strong enough that he could stay at home by himself, I took on a little job to where I would just go out and wait on tables. My friend had a restaurant, and I did that, and he was okay to be at home for a few hours by himself. He could move about, and I think that gave him a sense of, that independence a little bit. And I think that's an important factor in being that caregiver. But it also gave me a way to focus on something else and be something else, and meet people and talk to people. And I think that's so important in our journey through being a caregiver. I'm very thankful that I had people in my lives to help me. I have grown children, and they of course have their own lives, and I didn't depend on them to be there because I knew it was going to be hard for them to stop their life and come over. But as a caregiver, I needed to let them do some of that because I needed the break, and they needed to have that closeness with their dad. And I do believe that as time came on and he became more independent, he did get to where he would ride his bike in town, and we had a trailer made to hook to the back of our car to carry this bicycle wherever we went. And I felt a need that I should take him and do as much as I could with him, because I didn't know how long that he would have. But I still didn't see us. I just saw us for the next stage in our life to be together like this, that I was going to be his caregiver, and we were going to just grow old together like that. And I know that first year he wanted to go to, he went to Montana, and then we went to, first we took a trip out west, and I took him to the Grand Canyon. And he was, at that time, he was just in the wheelchair. I mean, he couldn't do a whole lot himself. So I would take him in and out of the car, and I would, just do everything you would do when you go on a trip, but you have to do it for two people, and all of the above paraphernalia that goes with that. But I think the times that we spent together were a valuable time, a time I wouldn't trade for anything. And I just could say that we need to, as caregivers, be sure and take care of ourselves as well as that other person, because we have not only are giving to them, but we have to give back to ourselves, and we have to give ourselves that break and that time. And there's many aids out there and help that I found over the time period. And he's since gone on to be with our Lord, and he's been gone now 4 years. And I cherish that time that I had with him. And he was, and it was a great experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Thank you.
First of all, I want to say thank you for having me, and I'm so glad to see all of y'all. And visiting my little family. I got the pleasure and trial of taking care of my grandmother for 18 months. And she lived to be 96, and it started out, it was going to be like a 9-to-5 job. Just come, sort of be with her and then go out about my little business. Well, when I first moved there, and now you know she had 4 brothers and one daughter, my mother, and 14 grandchildren. But apparently I was the only one available to relocate. So there you go. But grandmother and I had a real special relationship. And there's a very fine line between you want to be the boss and tell them, please don't drive and wreck our car. But they want to be the boss still. It's like sort of having a 2-year-old, but you can't put them on timeout. And you want to give them that respect because they're your elder and because that's the way you look at them. But when I came there, she had a nurse that came every day, twice a day. And she gave my grandmother 8 pills 3 times a day. And that, I didn't understand that. I wanted to know, well, what's the pills for? What are you doing? What does each pill do? And so I would sit there with the nurse, and to make a long story short, I learned what the pills were, I understood what they were for, and if something were to happen, which pill helped what. And the nurse finally came twice a week, then, once a week, then, once a week, then every other week. Finally, after about 3, almost 4 months, she didn't come at all. So that was a real blessing. But grandmother, bless her little heart, she was just so feisty. She wanted to be independent and cook, but I didn't want to have the kitchen burnt down. So we just got a bigger fire extinguisher, that just saved that problem, And we did have she did not want to take her pills. And me, I don't seem to have a problem with taking a pill, but she didn't want to take her pills. And she had, what's that? Arrhythmic heartbeat where it sort of stops sometimes in the middle of the night. Oh, it was so scary because she would stop breathing and her heart wouldn't work. So it was quite frightening. But if you're, as the caregiver, if you're freaked out or nervousy, which I apparently, as y'all all know me, I am definitely not the calmest bulb on the branch. So we all can agree with that. But if you appear to be freaked out because, oh my gosh, my loved one has quit breathing, then they're going to maybe not respond so well. So when grandmother would hide her pills or not want to take her pills, I would put out, we made a little game of it. I would put out my vitamins, my little, B12 and my little, CQ10 and, little vitamins to make me healthy. And we would make a little game out of it to see which one of us could take our pills the easiest. Then we would get chocolate. So I tried to always win. And then it was another thing that was really hard. I thought, because I wanted to remember Grandma as my grandmother and as always being the boss. But you can't let them run out in the street, and she kept wanting to wear, she didn't want to wear good clothes. The poor woman's 90 freaking 6. What are you saving it for, But you can't say that. And you have to show respect without being bossy. And there's a very fine line because you love them and you want to see them be the very best they can be. On a good note, I also turned Grandma on to Taco Bell and to McDonald's. She'd always worked on a farm, always raised her own vegetables, never ever really went to a fast food place. Well, luckily we didn't live very far away from a little McDonald's, and on a certain day, every Tuesday, they would have 50-cent ice cream cones. And for everything else she would forget, but Tuesday come along, Deanna, it's Tuesday, it's McDonald's, and she would remember that, and we would go over there. And then she never had a Taco Bell. So there were some really good, good things that you could get out of it, without it just making you, like, when I would get like so overwhelmed, I'd just go in my room and cry, just shut the door. But when she was there, I wanted whatever she wanted to do, I wanted it to be fun and let her feel like she was in control. And Lord knows I wasn't, but we all tried. We managed, and it made it. I learned a lot of good things and learned a lot of respect for her knowledge of the past, and just, I take it as a blessing and one of the most cherished times of my life. And I just would say, with anyone that's looking into this, just remember that even though they may forget some things, like who doesn't, but as time goes along, for an Alzheimer's patient, for example, instead of saying, Susie, do you know who I am? You walk in the room and you say, hey, Aunt Susie, this is your granddaughter, Deanna, or this is Joe Blow, your husband, or whomever. And that right there takes some kind of panic off of their mind so that they know who you are, or they don't have to worry about, I can't remember who this is. It's just like, if you think of it like this, when you're on an airplane, or as all of us have taken trips, the first thing the pilot says when there's turbulence, when the masks come down, he says, put the mask on you first. Because if you are not breathing, apparently you cannot help your child, your spouse, your loved one, or whomever, because if you're like out of it, then those people are going to be. So just take that into consideration and take care of yourself first, and then you'll be a better caregiver to anyone else.
Susan owns a company that barters, and I think that everybody that is in a situation where you may need some services you can't really pay for, but you have some other gifts, she's one that you will want to know. And Susan not only owns that, but she owns Huntsville Grapevine. You'll have to hear more about that. She takes care of her mother. Come on up. Her son had a very bad car accident.
When Bonnie asked me to come and speak, because I guess I should start from the beginning. My dad passed away about 10 or 11 years ago, and my sisters and I took care of him for 2 years. And so watching that very strong person that you're used to taking care of everything and seeing them, his mind was perfectly clear until about a week before he passed away, but over a 2-year period, just physically more and more not being able to take care of things. That's very hard, because he was always so proud and such a private person. But it allowed us time to spend together and to maybe revisit some things that we wouldn't have had a chance to, and come a little bit closer. And about 3 years ago, I've worked for myself for 20-something years in different capacities, and about 3 years ago, my son, well, I was on the phone with him, and he told me that he had left a friend's house, or he had left our house, he was headed to a friend's house, and that he'd talk to me later. And I hung the phone up, walked into a store here in town to meet my sister. I was in there maybe about 10 minutes, and I heard just the traffic report on the radio that said there's been a bad wreck in North Limestone County. Take a different route. It's in front of this store, take a different route. And I looked at my sister and I said, that's Trey. And she thought I was crazy. And I said, no, that's Trey. And I couldn't get him on the phone. So I finally found the number of the store, called, and I said, I've heard there's been a really bad wreck. Can you just tell me what kind of car it was? And they said it was a young kid named Trey. If you know his mom, call her. And I said, this is his mom. We found out later that there was an EMT who had gotten off work early to go and mow his yard that wasn't supposed to be there. He worked in Huntsville, was in North Limestone County where my son was at, had med flight and the fire department a block away in his phone. There was a nurse at the gas station that he just pulled out pumping gas. So everything was in place to save him. He had a ruptured aorta, fractured skull, collapsed lung, leg broken 3 places, ear ripped off, and physically he should not have survived. They were very wonderful at saving his life. The thing that we weren't aware of at the time was that he also suffered traumatic brain injury. And that was never really addressed. So we have dealt for the past 3 years with everything that goes along with traumatic brain injury. He has lost every friend that he has. As hard as it is to watch someone like my father, who has been in charge his whole life, lose physical capabilities, to watch a 19, 20-year-old who has been in martial arts for 10 years, could do splits both ways the day before the wreck, not be able to lift his head out of bed the next, and all of the just emotional trauma that goes along with that. It's been a really rough road. With that, there's been a lot of praise and a lot of joy that's come out of it. But for him, a 19-year-old that's supposed to be out on his own, taking care of himself, enjoying the world, starting his life, and has been sitting at my house for a year and a half, took himself off of driving. When the wreck happened, he had no insurance. He just turned 19, had fallen off insurance. It was right before you could keep them on there. And he was waiting to get into college. So he went 2 years without having any medical attention, and the issues that he had with his knee and a couple other things, the doctors told him there's nothing was wrong. And so he suffered with pain for those for 2 years. He grew a very strong distrust of medical community, so it's hard for me to get him to the doctor. Now, luckily, during that time, we did find a homeopathic doctor that has helped him, and we've seen steady increase. And me looking back at where he was when we started, he can't see it as well, but me looking back, he's made such amazing strides. But as a caregiver, we were actually looking for a way for him to volunteer, for me to work with families going through what we'd been through. And we couldn't find what we were looking for. I started to start my own nonprofit. And I had researched exchanges for about 10 years just because of my experience. I had owned coupon magazines a couple different places. I'd worked for a division of Southern Living magazine, and I'd always done trade. And I would see businesses that had resources, other businesses that needed it, and what was missing was people were just afraid to spend the cash, to let go of the cash. So I thought there's got to be a different way. And I started researching exchanges. So about the time that I was looking to launch a nonprofit, I thought, you know, really, I can build a way for nonprofits to make money within the exchange, and I can help a lot more people. So that's what we've done. We actually have a nonprofit who launched. It's a single mom who had been working with single moms for 7 years. She wanted to launch a nonprofit and didn't have the funds to do it herself. So with the ways that we had created within the exchange for her to earn income, she paid for her accountant, her attorney, her videographer, her web design, her logo, her grant writer, her business cards. It cost her $4.80 to launch her nonprofit. So with that, the reason for all of my businesses are to help the community. The next thing that came was the HuntsvilleGrapevine.com. It's a national community site. There's separate sites in different cities. We purchased the license to this area because I was hoping to have something for my son to do from home. And when I saw that he couldn't do that, I decided to take it over and do it myself. And with that, once again, we allow nonprofits on there free of charge. My vision for it is for every nonprofit, every support group, every church in the area to have a presence on it, so that when people are going through situations, one of the most frustrating things for me is nobody could tell me where to get help. Nobody could tell me what to plug into. And so my vision, I just don't have the time to do all of it, but my vision is to create one central place where people can find all that, where they can find the support groups and the resources and whatever they need, just a community.